consent all around. Good deal. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for making the time to be here with us early in the morning or late at night, or if you're in Australia, perfect time for everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Myself and Dr. Devika Madali are going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals interest group and some of the work that we're doing surrounding mapping the RDA outputs and recommendations to the Sustainable Development Goals and underlying indicators and targets. For kind of brief run of show, I'm going to do some intro and background surrounding the group and provide a bit of a background. Beth is going to provide some information. We have a special speaker to talk about the Eos Future Initiative and RDA domain ambassadors and some funding that's available for our European colleagues. And then Devika is going to dive into some of the excellent work that she's doing and her team is doing to really formalize some of this mapping and build some semantic mapping of RDA RDA outputs and recommendations to the SDG indicators. If anybody has trouble hearing us or any technical problems throughout, do not hesitate to drop things in chat. Also, we really want to make this highly interactive and really want to get you all involved. So don't hesitate to drop things in chat. I dropped some notes, some shared notes there. I see that most people here have already jumped in and noted their participation. So thank you so much. And I'll just go ahead and dive into kind of some background. So you'll see Dr. Ingo Machman, Devika, myself, and then our colleague, recent Dr. Lindsay Barbieri. Congratulations to Lindsay. Unfortunately, Ingo and Lindsay cannot be here today, though they send their regards. Those are your co-chairs for our group. This has been a long time running. We started a BOF in P12 surrounding International Data Week in Botswana, where we all kind of began discussing the need to see how to approach the kind of global development space and some of the underlying data management and data collection issues surrounding global development. We've had a number of different sessions trying to see our scope and focus and keep things moving, including at P17, we did a special kind of special presentation at the adoption session and some discussion with council members. Really what our aim is to map RDA outputs and recommendations both to the overarching SDG goals, including working groups and interest groups that are really focused on those particular goals, such as those in health and well-being, those in agriculture and global nutrition, as well as underlying targets and indicators. So for a bit of context, the Sustainable Development Goals are operationalized through underlying indicators and underlying targets. For instance, for global health and well-being, there are a number of different indicators surrounding instances of communicable and non-communicable diseases, as well as underlying social determinants of health, such as removal from poverty, access to clean housing and living environments, and a number of different underlying social determinants of health. But the largest issue is that each of these underlying indicators have their own unique challenge to collecting that data in a standardized way, leveraging interoperable standards, metadata, and collection procedures and underlying instruments. And in 2018, it was noted that only 40% of the indicators that operationalize the SDGs could be collected at what is called Tier 1, meaning that there are recognized interoperable international standards for ways of collecting this data and clear data management and data collection procedures that can be implemented within national statistical institutes or institutions and stakeholders that are collecting this data. So our aim really is how can we leverage RDA outputs, recommendations, and aligned activities to get that 40% up? How can we address the underlying data management and data collection procedures, the underlying data infrastructure to make things more fair and interoperable, as well as how can we get stakeholders involved across a number of different interagencies that will be necessary to do this. So here you can see this is going to be a very broad scope of mapping outputs and recommendations to those underlying targets and underlying indicators, also mapping high-level working groups and interest groups to those goals, as well as thinking about the stakeholders and nations that are actually boots on the ground collecting these indicator data sources, and how can we reach them and make certain that we are getting these outputs and recommendations into the right people's hands. So for instance, let's run through a brief example of what this might look like in practice and an example of some of our previous mappings. Target 3.b is to support the research and development of vaccines and medicines for the communicable and non-communicable diseases that primarily affect developing countries. But of course, this is actually operationalized and measured by a number of different indicators, from proportion of population that's vaccinated, assistance to medical research and basic health sectors through funding and development of data infrastructure, and proportion of health facilities with relevant essential medicines available and affordable. Clearly, one clear output and recommendation that quickly comes to mind that has been a massive initiative across RDA is the COVID working group output that provides very clear guidance for data management surrounding the development of vaccines, as well as the monitoring of the distribution of infectious diseases, the associated ethical and data sovereignty issues surrounding who controls and manages this data, how can this data be collected and shared in an interoperable fashion, etc. All of you, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. Everybody is well aware of all the underlying issues here. But at the high level goal, there's a clear number of different RDA outputs or RDA working groups and interest groups that map to that overarching goal of good health and well-being, from the health data interest group to epidemiology, common standard, a number of different health interest groups that map clearly to the high level goal of good health and well-being. That's merely one example. For instance, the underlying data infrastructure and technological and scientific infrastructure is necessary to promote the Sustainable Development Goals. Clearly by target 9.5, we can see that there are a number of different RDA outputs and recommendations that map to supporting sustainable research data repositories, to implementing common standards for persistent identification so that data can be persistently identified, clear data management plans that are machine readable, machine operable, to a lot of the underlying high-level principles and common measures for how to make data fair, how to make certain that you're building trustworthy repositories, how do you make certain that you're protecting data sovereignty and data ownership. Lots of different needs across a number of different underlying scientific infrastructure in industry and innovation, as well as how to make certain that these scientific industries are partnering effectively to respect the people that they are, the participants that are involved in that research. We're also clearly a lot of different RDA outputs and recommendations and activities are addressing the underlying need to support global inclusion and global knowledge sharing, such as activities within the RDA CoData Data Science Summer Schools and a number of different education and training interest groups that directly address the need to both promote scientific knowledge sharing and data sharing and management knowledge across a number of different stakeholder groups, as well as just promote overall inclusion and diversity in who is participating in science, who is sharing data, who has access to that data, and who can be part of moving science forward. So that is a very quick introduction of what is the goal of our group and how do we see the alignment of RDA with the Sustainable Development Goals more broadly. But I think we've done a lot of work in pulling this data together and building a mapping, but we need to kind of push forward to make things a bit more formalized. So you'll hear about Devika and our work in building semantic mapping within Onto SDG to build ontology surrounding how this data can be mapped in. But first, I want to give Beth an opportunity to speak about EOSC's role in promoting some of these activities and promoting other activities and give you a chance to jump in. So I'll go ahead and turn over to Beth now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Anthony. I don't think that I'm going to take a full 10 minutes. This is really just my one slide advertising to this group that we are looking for a domain ambassador specifically to address the topic of sustainable development goals. So talking to this particular group to say, hey, are you interested maybe in becoming an RDA/EOS Future Domain Ambassador? Or do you know somebody who might be interested in becoming an RDA/EOS Future Domain Ambassador? Oh, Stephanie, do you have a question?
Yeah, may I just ask, sorry, may I just ask, do people have to be European residents to apply for the grants?
Yes, they do. Well, no, okay. European residents or work for a European institution.
Okay, so you could work for a European institution, but be located elsewhere.
You could, yes.
Okay.
You have to have that affiliation somehow though, because the funding is coming from Horizon Europe. So it is specifically targeting the development of the European Open Science Cloud platform as well. So the Eos Future Project, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, aims to develop the European Open Science Cloud platform consisting of data, professionally provided services, and open research products and infrastructure. So we're looking specifically about how EOS can become more responsive to the needs of those working with sustainable development goals. So thank you. So that was a point I was going to bring up, but I suppose that's a good thing to just lead with. So for those of you who might be working in a European context and again, no European partners, please consider applying for this. This call is not actually on our website just yet. We're looking at, it'll probably be posted in July, but there was an earlier call for domain ambassadors that basically has more or less the same criteria that you can have a look at on the platform. There's also other grants that EOS Future is involved in, including a cross-disciplinary promotion grant that is currently open. And the cross-disciplinary one, again, all the funding is meant to sort of be focused on European partners. But if you work in a research project for which there is one European partner and multiple other partners, that particular project could qualify for the grant as well. So maybe have a look at that. In relation to the work with the EOS Future Domain Ambassadors, one of the things that I am aiming to do, and I'll just insert this quickly, maybe I am actually going to talk for 10 minutes, is on the RDA website, there are pages that are dedicated to describing what RDA does for the various disciplines. And they're very, very brief overview pages, and the Sustainable Development Goals actually has a pretty good page compared to some of the other disciplines that are represented there. I'm looking to kind of connect the information though across these different pages, standardize them into something, into a kind of template, and update information, and maybe do a spotlight on a subdomain or a particular project or something within the Sustainable Development Goals to kind of make those pages a little bit more public, forward-facing, inviting people to come and join RDA by exploring what it is that RDA does for the disciplines. So if anybody is interested in that work, unfortunately, that's not funded work, but that means also that you don't necessarily have to be European to participate in that. Please do reach out. I can send an email around to this group after this session is over with kind of a summary of what I've said here as well. And that's it. Are there any other questions? All right, good. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth. Devika, do you want to give a shot at sharing your screen? I'll go ahead and stop sharing so you can run through onto SDG.
Yeah, I am just trying to do that. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm audible, right?
Yes.
And the slide is advancing.
Yes.
Yeah, getting the essentials out of the way. Yeah.
Good deal.
So good morning and good afternoon and good evening, guys, across the globe. It's really all time zones, I think, here. And thanks for being here. As Anthony introduced our group's work, we are the RDA for UN SDGs interest group, and our URL is that. And I'm sure most of you are members already, and those who are not, we just invite you to become a member at that URL there. Basically, our IG aims to collate, to put it simply, collate activities ongoing within the RDA that could align with the UN SDGs. And we need to assess and address the needs and gaps for UN addressable by these, the SDGs addressable by these RDA activities that we hope to identify and represent. And based on the data collected, maybe strategize to form organizational partnerships with RDA surrounding the UN SDGs. So at a very broad level, those are the objectives the interest group has. And coming to the UN SDGs themselves, excuse me, I think most of you know about them, but I thought just put one description at least, that these SDGs were adopted by the UN in 2015 with a very broad scope for achieving peace and prosperity for people as well as planet. And the SDGs are identified, 17 SDGs are identified across domains such as health, agriculture, climate, education, and others. And they are they serve as an urgent call for action by countries in to go into global partnership to solve the problems across these domains, all while tackling the overarching issues of climate change and working to preserve the planet itself, preserve the oceans and forests. And yeah, those are the 17 SDGs. And why my team and I took up the work of formalizing and representing these into some kind of an ontological representation is because we found that these 17 are compact, as you can see on the screen. But when one goes into these each of the goals and goes into what the targets are and what the indicators are and try to get our head around those, it could be a little bit overwhelming maybe. And we wanted to sort of guide the work of formalizing or representation through some kind of a tool or a platform. And that's exactly what Onto SDG is all about. So Onto SDG presents semantic infrastructure for representation of the UN SDGs, the targets and indicators. It enables interlinking the goals with respective maybe projects, initiatives, labs, organizations. This was the generic objective of Onto SDG, and researchers in related domains that contribute to the UN SDGs. But now the adaptation that we will take you through today will be for the RDA itself, adaptation of the Onto SDG. So the objective is basically a semantic analysis of data to help assess the extent of implementation and the impact of SDGs. Onto SDG solicits input in a very simple interactive interface. And we have tried to sort of give some help and augment it with something like drop-down menus and some simple notes that the users can help to populate data. So that's how it looks on the landing page, the Onto SDG. And going to the formalization itself inside the ontology, I'll just give a very brief intro to it. So we have axioms now, maybe we have reached about 1600, which is just a starting point right now. And then we have the classes defined. We have 9 basically. The main classes, of course, are the goals, the targets, and the indicators. And then we connect that to what's called publication. That is going to change. The publication basically refers to an RDA outcome or a recommendation, or what is adopted. But then we did recognize in the last round of edits that it's not necessary that WG or IG has given in an outcome or a recommendation as it, but still their work may be related to one or the other UN SDGs. So we have accommodated for that the WG and IG has still not given a formal outcome, but their work is related. So that's also worked into the formalization. Anyhow, these are at the high level, the 9 classes we are going with. We on purpose keep the design quite simple and straightforward. Now, coming to an individual class, say goal. So that's how it's represented. The goals are, of course, 1 to 17, the UN SDG, and then those are have got the and we define the properties, the targets and the properties. So taking the targets like that, and then we have all the targets listed. By the way, the language that we use are exactly copied from the UN SDG website. We did not change the language, and sometimes we find the description or definition of the target of the targets or the indicators to be verbose. But then I'm hoping it makes sense to the people who work in the domains better than I could understand them. But for reasons of just maintaining a standard and not differing, we have taken the same language, whatever is used for definition by the UN itself. So within the target, we have the class indicator represented, and that's how it is. And we have 2 types of properties described. The object properties, for example, say a group has a chair, or it works in a certain domain. His chair has domain, it has a recommendation, it has publication, or a goal has a target, because we need these semantic to build the semantic relationship. So we have the object properties defined within the properties, and then the data properties for each and every class, that what it could contain. Maybe it has an URL, or it's a keyword, or some kind of it has a target year attached to it, or an event. These all are used as through the data property feature. Now, taking an example, maybe just arbitrary SDG 13, for example, which deals with climate change. So it has the targets like going from 1, 2, 3, and A and B. It has targets 5 that are listed on the UN SDG site, and that's how we have represented these. And taking one target within it, we design it like this and say it has indicators, and the indicator is measured by something or the other, which is defined in the UN SDG. So that's how it is. I know this could be overwhelming and hardly visible, because these are taken from the actual system, and I could not sort of enlarge the font or anything. So it's better to see in a schematic diagram. This is how the representation is at a very high level. We have a null thing connected to the goal to the target and the indicator, and all connected through an agent, which is basically a role That could be something like a person can be a chair of a group, a person can be an author, and such thing. And all are connected through an RDA outcome or recommendation, so that we can trace the RDA outcomes to what goals and what targets and what indicators they are connected to. And we could also have a view from the domain, from which exact domain it's connected to what goal and what target and what indicators. Maybe this is in some way connected to what Beth mentioned a few moments ago, that she is trying to uh, we have a disciplinary approach after analyzing what each IG and WG is doing. So from the goal point of view, this is how it is laid out in a schematic way. If we want to show the each goal is given like that, the 17 goals, and then they are connected to the target and the indicator, of course, and also to the working groups that is connected with that goal, and the recommendation or output, the respective recommendation and output. So taking the particular maybe SDG 13, as I showed in the screenshot, it has got it's connected to 5 targets, and the 5 targets in turn are connected to the indicators within that. So that's how the schematic layout looks. And to just very simply put at a very high level, this is how the workflow works. We have the onto SDG with a very at the moment a very simple metadata, mostly provenance. It's not a metadata worked out for you in SDG at the moment. Then we have the data coming in, the data store itself, which is curated and then mapped. And then on the user side, there could be an input query, and then we collect that results in a web interface. So at a very high and a simple level of expression, it could be that. So right now we are collecting data through the onto SDG input interface. We host the global open access portal, the UNESCO one, and we have just used the domain space for now, and because it is safer to be on a cloud rather than a server with connectivity issues. But this is going to change to something more more meaningful for the onto SDG itself, and we'll house it in another domain. But basically, at the moment, we can access it at the URL given over here. So this is how it looks. Again, apologies for the very small fonts and illegibility, but I'll be taking you through the system, so you will be able to see it for yourself more clearly, at least for those who are connected through laptops. And my apologies again for people who are physically present there and have no access to go through it with me on their systems. But then we'll be sharing all the resources, and you can do it at your own convenience and give us the feedback at a later point in time. So this is how the interface looks. And first of all, we present the rudimentary information, like collecting your name and last name, whoever is interacting with the system, and then choosing a domain. And these basically these domains we have derived from the RDA domains that are published as domains on the RDA website. And then entering the name of the working group or the interest group that you are connected with, or for which you are giving the data. And then asserting whether your group really has an output or a recommendation that is already published. If yes, you say yes. If no, you are just asked, you go ahead. If yes, then you're asked for a title of that recommendation or outcome, and other things like email ID and who is the contact person. And then we collect the keywords. There are about 6 keywords we have limited, but this can be increased. But one is mandatory because we need the semantics. We need to build the semantics around what the group is doing. And the keywords are also, in a way, controlled vocabulary, and we have borrowed from the Zenodo repository. the keywords that are already listed for the various RDA groups description and the outcomes and recommendation description, so that we can bring out some kind of a standardization and people can pick them out rather than enter in free text, which becomes a bit difficult to for semantic mapping. But however, if the keyword is not found, there is an option to pick up other and then furnish the data against that. So basically, what is expected is of a person is to pick up a goal that is aligned with their work or nearly aligned or whatever, and you're able to pick up one or more goals from here. And once that is picked up, what you will be presented is the respective targets for that. So as I already mentioned, when you are asked a group name, we have given some assistance where there is a drop-down list, and you can simply pick up the title of the WG or IG instead of having to type it. If you are picking up that you have a recommendation and the outcome for your group, then you're presented with a drop-down list of those from the RDA website so that you can simply pick that up. And the same goes for authors who are already listed on the Zenodo, but I do recognize that maybe some are not listed. In that case, you'll use the other and then furnish the details. For the number of authors, we have about 15, the possibility of enlisting about 15, and I think nobody has more than that, or if somebody has, we could always extend that. So that's the interface. Once you have picked up the goal, then it opens up a page where it only presents the relevant targets to those goals that you have picked up. You pick up the targets that is closest aligned to your group's work, and then it brings up the indicators. You can see that the list of indicators is presented, and then you're presented with a box which you have to tick. So at least one is mandatory that you tick. Now we are very aware that actually the indicators are generally a measure of something, mostly a measure of something or the other. It could be a percentage, a number, or something like a definite value. And we are very aware that the RDA groups may still not be ready with actual values to furnish in this box. So that's okay if you do not have a value to give, it's fine. But what's mandatory is to tick the indicator that is closest aligned to your work. So you have the opportunity to preview whatever you've been entering, and then just submit that. So it's as simple as that. I thought I'll just take you through that before going to the system. And what Anthony and I want to do here is to walk you through the system for a few minutes and see how you get to interact. And of course, you will have questions, and then we could sort of take it from there and see whether we can, whether you will be able to sort of interact without problems, and then collect your suggestions, whatever comments that you have. Thanks very much. I'll pause here if there is any question, or if Anthony wants to add something to this.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Devika, and thank you so much, everyone. I dropped the link to onto SDG into the chat if everyone can access it there. Let us know if you have any troubles accessing that or navigating through it. But
yeah, I hope you can get onto the system. Okay. And again, my apologies to people who are in the hall, but yeah, they'll be sharing. This is as simple as maybe filling a Google form, except for like understanding what exactly is required by a particular goal or a target or indicator before you will be able to do. So shall we start the session, Anthony, with them entering some data?
yeah, That sounds great. If everybody can access the link that's in the chat, and maybe this is really just a working session of trying to get everybody in there and running through, entering in either your interest group or working group output or activities, and trying to see any questions, concerns, problems. And if anybody would like to share screen or raise questions or concerns, please do.
Yeah, really, we want to, this working session is to solicit your critical remarks for us to improve, because it is a beta that we are taking you through, and your comments will be most valuable for us to, refine it and make it usable for the RDA community. So let's get on with it. So I hope you're all on this screen. You're seeing the onto SDG screen now. And you can see there are three tabs going across over here: home, the interface, and the working of SDG. So you want to go to the input interface. Once you click that, you come to this screen. So are you all on the screen that shows domains? I hope so. And what you would want to do is to enter your name. So if I just go slow and assume that you're with me, but if you want me to pause or something, please raise a hand or simply speak. Any of you can interrupt me, because it may, different people may take a little bit of time to read what is relevant and then be able to take. I'm just doing arbitrarily. And so for example, I pick up food and agricultural sciences because that was the one that I was connected to for a long time in RDA. And then we say the agri semantics WG, for example, is the working. I'm doing, for example, only. So I pick that up, and then I say whether does your group have an official RDA output or recommendation. Suppose I say yes, we do have, and it did have. And what was it all about? So as you can see, we have culled this out of the Zenodo repository. No, this is out of the outputs and recommendations page, which have been published on the RDA website. So what was their recommendation or outcome? They had one.
Something 39 things, whatever. It has a 39 in it.
Yeah, okay. No, I think it's not here, but anyway, I'll pick up the wheat one, which is the closest. I mean, I'm just playing around. I'm sorry. So suppose I pick that up as a recommendation or this thing. Like I already said, a group may not have a recommendation or outcome that is accepted and published. In that case, you leave it blank, and then we simply will map the name of the interest group or the working group itself to the goals that are picked up subsequently. So the number of authors, say we have 2 authors, then as you can see, if I say 2, it opens up the possibility of entering 2 names, and then I again arbitrarily pick up the author names. If the author is not listed, then you have the option of choosing other and then entering the name. Once other is presented and the name is entered, the next time it will be there in the drop down list. So the next time around, you're not required to do that. So after that, we collect the contact email of the person. So I hope others are up to speed and you have been able to do this so far, the data entry, or do you want me to pause?
I had a question, Devika.
Yes, please.
So a lot of that information is already on the RDA website. So for example, you were able to select random authors for the weak data interoperability recommendation, but the RDA website already has the information that the weak data interoperability, it has the authors for that particular recommendation. So would it be possible to connect so that you wouldn't have to re-enter the information? It's the same with the domains, because the RDA website already knows the domains for the groups. Would it be possible to connect so that when you select a group, you have this pre-populated?
Yes, that's a very good question and relevant too. Yeah, this is directly related to how our interest group worked, first of all. So as Anthony already introduced, the group is quite historic, goes back a few years now. And Anthony did important work of mapping the outcomes to particular SDGs and the targets and indicators from his side. And those mappings are valuable, and we could do that. So I do not know if we call that the top down approach or the bottom up approach or whatever. So in that approach, we, the group chairs, take the data that's already there and populate, and we do that. And that is good, but that has its limitation. It has our perception of what a group does or what they want it to be represented as. So this particular work, this onto SDG, is the other way around, or maybe I call it bottom up, and say that the groups themselves interact and give us data which they want to furnish against this, because behind this form is a formalization where we semantically connect a group's work to its outcome, to the relevant SDG and the target and indicators. So we work both ways are possible, top down or bottom up over here. Yes, your suggestion is valuable, and we hope to populate as much as possible with all the data that's already available. As I already said, we have taken the data out of the Zenodo repository and tried to populate as much as possible over here already, as you can see. Even for maybe the author names, the titles of the recommendation, or for something like keywords, like I said, that's already listed. We have already taken these over here to sort of help the person pick up rather than type. Does that answer your question? So
yes, thanks.
Okay. In the next step, you enter the contact person, yourself or whoever is the contact person, and then you pick up the keywords. So now there are 6 we have listed, but if the need is felt for more, we could add it. But at least one is mandatory. So you pick up the one that's closest to describes your work. So as I said, this whole vocabulary is picked up from the available ones at the Zenodo. Research, and if it's not listed, suppose you do have the option of other, and when you pick up the other, you get a free text over here to enter your own keywords. So that's what is expected. Your up to 6 keywords is what you can give, and then you go for the next. So now in this screen, is there any question?
Can I ask a question on that previous page? Just regarding working groups and interest groups, I anticipate that there are new and emerging working groups which would be relevant to these goals. In that instance, like, is there any way we could note it, like say that these groups are planning to provide outputs which would be relevant?
Sure. That's again a good question. We have at the moment entered whatever is an endorsed working group or the interest group over here, but we could always provide again another option where a group is planning, and they could also enter the title of the group or whatever they're interested in. Yes, that provision can be made. Thank you. So yeah, the other thing I want to mention here is that, okay, UN SDGs are UN SDGs and RDA is RDA. It's not necessary that any of our working group or interest group has actually written down into their case statement that we want to work towards SDG-N, one of the 17. Maybe they don't have the awareness or the realization that there is an UN SDG directly related to them and they are working in that domain. Maybe that's not there and that's not explicit when they started their group or sat down to write this case statement. We recognize that this could be the case, but we want to encourage the RDA, WGs, and IGs chairs, as well as the membership, to try and see how their work, though it's progressed to a certain extent, or they are in preliminary stages, whatever that is, how their work relates to what goal or target or the indicator. So that's exactly, we know that it may not be one of their primary concern to be aligned to UN SDG, but through our group, we want to work and bring about this awareness and say that in some way you must be impacting and giving an outcome that is aligned to the UN SDGs, which will be a variable overall contribution of the RDA itself towards the UN SDGs. So that's, of course, the underlying objective of our group itself. So let us progress, and then I say next. And then when we come say that, you're presented with this in page where all the 17 goals with the goal statement is presented. As I said, the language is taken from the UN SDG itself and nothing is altered. So goal 1 is poverty, and goal 2 zero hunger, and so on and so forth. And as I said, you may feel that your group's work is aligned to one goal directly or more than one goals, and then you may pick up accordingly. So say I go for the first 2, and then we can progress. So I have you must remember that on this page I have picked up 1 and 2, but maybe somebody picks up 7 and 17 or whatever that they do. And so this really depends upon the understanding of the particular UN SDGs and being able to relate to that and your group's work, and then pick up the one that is relevant to your group's work. So when I say 1 and 2 and say next, you can see that on this page, you will be presented now with the respective targets, because I said 1 and it has opened up the targets that are relevant or that are listed by the UN for this particular goal. So you can see target 1.1 is by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, and things like this. Or target 1.2 is to reduce at least by half the population of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty, and so on and so forth. So you can see what aligns to your group, the target that maybe exactly aligns or nearly aligns or somewhat aligns, whatever you can, you feel, and pick that up that is relevant. Now I'm just doing this in an arbitrary way. I hope you people are doing it for your own goals along with me. Please let me know if you have any particular questions as you progress. So I did that for the target 1 because I picked up 2 goals. Then you can see that there will be the relevant target that opens up. And then when I pick up a target 1.2, then the relevant indicator box will open up, and the indicators are listed over there. and at least picking up one is mandatory. And as I already said before, we are very much aware that under the RDA work, the WGs and IGs may not be ready with a value. Those who are ready with the value, or which is called tier 1, as Anthony said, if you have the exact number represented in a standard way that the UN expects, it's tier 1, and you could always furnish that data. But if you do not have a value, like for example, it is shown over here, the proportion of population living below national poverty line by sex and age. So maybe we are not ready with that kind of data. It should only be available with some kind of a national statistical office, for in this case, or something like this. But if something is relevant, at least at the target level, kindly furnish. You are required to give at least one, tick the target that is, tick the indicator that is relevant. And so also goes for the second target that I have chosen. So as many targets as you choose, you have to choose at least one indicator connected to that target. And then we say next.
Devika, maybe before moving, I see Robert has his hand up.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So that actually triggered one of your last comments, triggered a question. I mean, I think this is interesting because it's basically, organizing all the tools and approaches that RDA comes with and says, here they are these potential solutions to your problems? What's missing is we don't really, aren't really collecting organized information about what the real data problems are that the sustainable development community has. And, if RDA happens to have a solution, great, but there's no, I'm just curious if you've thought about how to make the link so that first off, it identifies areas where RDA might do more in an area that's of a priority to all the different SDG domains. And I work with a lot of the statistical offices and UN agencies and others who work on particular SDG areas, and they obviously do have a lot of data needs, but have you thought about how to connect this ontology to their inputs?
Yes, Robert, if I understood it correctly, yeah, you're pointing out to one of our basic objectives that the IG has is to sort of one, collect data, second, analyze the data and see and identify the gaps that we have to recognize that we have with the UN SDGs. Gaps or for want of a better language, maybe potential areas of collaboration, identify that. And then as a final, the grand goal is to sort of forge partnerships based upon such findings. So I can say that we are in step 1 now to solicit input, first of all, from our groups. And based on the data that we would be able to collect, which we are hoping to collect through this kind of an input, a simplified input form, if you would like, then go into analysis of those. As I already said, Anthony has been doing this on his own from like the top-down approach and taking down and breaking down the recommendations and outcomes and how they relate to what target. He's been doing this, but now we are soliciting this input from the groups themselves. And once we have the data, we hope to do the other 2 steps. Am I right in saying that, Anthony?
That's precisely it. I think, Bob, also, I think to address maybe one of your points, that many of the data management, data collection sort of underlying fair data principle issues that are represented at individual targets likely generalize across all of them. or multiple within a particular target, like cluster of targets or a particular cluster of goals. And I think seeing where RDA could maybe approach a cluster of goals or a cluster of targets would also be something that this mapping and graph would allow to demonstrate, like high priority areas where RDA has multiple outputs that align with multiple different targets or can address the underlying data issues across multiple different targets, and then begin to build those connections so that we can make like lots of impact if possible, or bring that to stakeholders that have those sorts of issues.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I understand the focus in this step on organizing RDA's understanding of its relationship to SDGs, but what I'm not understanding is whether there's the opportunity to improve RDA's understanding of what the SDG community really needs and what the complicated data problems they face. I mean, just to take one example, I'm part of a CODATA working group in partnership with the International Union on this for the scientific study of population. And it's working on ontologies for demographic data, which are used heavily at national statistical offices. But the ontological problems faced there are, you know, they're very specific to those, to the way in which demography and statistics evolved. And, you know, the group is trying to write a report about that. So, you know, I think it's important for us to somehow solicit information from like diverse national statistical offices that then can match with the ontology and the data model you have here. So, you know, somebody from a statistical office can't look at this input interface and make any sense of it. But if there was a different interface aimed at them, and then that connected, you know, to this structure, then we'd be making that connection. So that's sort of what I'm trying to see where that fits. Because we're not learning anything about what the SDG problems are that, you know, real statistical offices and UN agencies face every day when they try to create consistent indicators for 200 or more national entities with all sorts of data quality differences and different ways of measuring supposedly the same things. That's the big challenge on the SDG side, and why it's taken so long to come up with agreed, you know, functional indicators.
Yeah, no, I think that is that's really valuable, Bob, that you brought this up. But yes, frankly, we are not there yet, whatever you're suggesting. But yes, we would. I mean, that's one of our the targets of the IG itself, to see how we could forge partnerships and collaborations around these problems that you pointed out. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of my chairs that we'll be very happy to collaborate and see how we could use this infrastructure to address the problems that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
You know, you were at that stage yet, but it just seems to me that there should be a target out there, which is not just have a great data model for what RDA does, but also to link that to a great data model for what the SDGs are about. So,
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, moving forward, again, we are we are in the screen presented with the targets with respect to the goal 2 that I selected. So say I pick up 2 targets for against that goal 2, and then again as it opens up the respective indicators for the targets that we are picking out, and then we populate that. And I should emphasize that please note that at least one is mandatory, and if not the value, you just pick up at least the indicator which you think your group will eventually give some value for. And again, here Bob's suggestion is good, that we could use what's already available, say something like the statistical offices, or to give guidance to how we work and how we actually get the indicators. So I picked up 2 goals, and the system presented the respective targets, and then it presented the respective indicators. And so we have picked those up, and then we say next, and then it says you could check whatever input you have given so far, and you could just review that data that you furnished so far. It will all be listed over here, and then you could either go back and edit something that you would like to fix, or then you could simply say submit, and then it gets submitted to the system. Say thank you for your submission. So we have tried the exercise here has been to make it as simple as getting your input in a Google form, for example, or something. Because as I said, reading the whole UN document for understanding the 17 goals, and then understanding the targets and understanding the indicators, trying to input that could be, quite a task. So we thought we will have some kind of a guided interface for you to interact and give your input. So that's how it works. Maybe I pause here and take, if you people have been able to do this along with me, some kind of a test run. We would like to know if you have comments to improve this, in what way. Yes, the floor is the audience. And Anthony has kindly agreed to take notes. So please go ahead. Any questions, or mostly apprehensions, or whatever you have when you interact with this?
I think Stephanie has a question. She put it in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, Stephanie.
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Mara. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I didn't want to say something. I just wanted to note your question. So I thought it was a good question.
Thank you.
What was the question?
I can read it out, Devika, if you can't see the chat. How would this work for interest or working groups that provide domain agnostic outputs that you could apply across many or all the SDGs? Would they have to fill in 17 goals and sort of, or are you not looking for domain agnostic at this point? Because it would be difficult to map them down to targets and indicators, maybe.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. See, I mean, when we drive semantics, we do depend heavily on being related to a domain, or more than one domains, if you please, and through basically through the keywords that are expressed in the various outputs or the outcomes, that sort of is a semantic link between all the work that happens. So basically, if somebody is thinks there are, I mean, there are 17, there might be something more than that, like you're trying to mention, that they are not exactly falling under a domain, but still they could be related to or whatever, and pick up that goal. Or we could provide, of course, a free text box to enter other. And then once, like I said, once we have solicited the other, then it will get entered as one of the domains in this, at least not in the RDA website, in this representation, and then it could be reused by others. So we could work that out. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I was just typing a response. I think maybe having some, maybe having something like domain agnostic might be useful, but I don't know how you would then link it.
Yeah, I mean, they could say domain agnostic, or we could have something like multidisciplinary, or this needs some discussion. But we could have something like that, and looking at the implication it has on the semantic map itself, what we want to do. For example, somebody is working happily about something about water, or happy working in their own as a researcher, and they don't realize basically that they are also connected to SDG 13, which is about climate change. And it's not necessary the researcher understands that or makes an explicit effort to connect to climate. But through our representation, if we have all that is happening related to climate and all that is happening related to water under some SDG, under some RDA WG, then through this kind of a formalization, we could draw the connects, the semantic connects, and say that RDA at a higher level or in totality does contribute to, when we take SDG 13 to climate change, we can relate all that is related to climate change and report that, or agriculture or education or whatever pillar that we are talking about. So that is the kind, that is one of the applications I can think of when we have a domain-driven or a semantic-driven engine. So that's why we have built. Otherwise, it could be any other Excel sheet or Google form. But why we are going into an ontological engineering is to draw these connects and to be able to in future draw inferences when we have enough data populated. Thanks. Any other question or feedback you have?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes.
When you do the data input, do you have a review process for the data that goes in? I guess my concern is that is there a second reader? Just because, yeah, some of these outputs might be complicated, and just in case we miss something along the way.
Right now, we do not have a review because we are an IG and we are 4 chairs, and we are not necessarily experts on the work that the 92 WGs or IGs are doing. So we are not in a position to sort of validate or really critically review the data, but we are hoping that we are still a limited number of groups and IGs, and we are hoping the member or the chair who is furnishing the data in this input really knows that work, and they're going. But yes, your point is well taken that there could be something erroneous, and we have to take care of. Maybe set some kind of quality check step into this. Yes, thank you.
That might also be a thing. I mean, that's very related to what Mara said, but because you're getting new keyword, you're allowing entry of new keywords and authors. So, you might get someone who just doesn't know that Anthony is spelled with a TH and doesn't find him and just puts him in without and things like that.
Yeah. That the variations can be resolved because in the formalization they come together, and that we could resolve in the back end. But it is really somebody casually comes and plays. As you saw, we do not have right now on purpose a step for authentication. We do not have a login and password right now, because we are just inviting the input by anybody with who we are sharing this. But we could have an authentication step and say that you are a member of RDA and authenticate that and allow only those members to interact with the system, and we collect their name and contact and things like this, which right now is not there. And the matter of this other, yes, whenever we are talking about formalization, giving the other is directly an enemy of standardization. I recognize that, but then it is necessary sometimes to that people have the feeling that none of that is related, and only for that we have provided. But we try to, in the back end, try to resolve that if it is mapping into something standard that's already available.
Could I maybe ask a question to everybody that's in attendance? I think one of our aims here is this sort of bi-directional knowledge sharing of attempting to inform the RDA community of what the SDG goals are, their underlying indicators and targets, such as the kind of underlying issue that Bob mentioned of how do we inform the RDA of what the larger challenges are and data challenges are across the SDGs and in the development space. In your opinions, it is listing the goals and listing the indicators and targets, is that sufficient to provide enough knowledge so that a co-chair filling this out can make an informed choice? Are there other education materials or guides or materials that you think might be necessary? Is that clear enough as you're navigating that list? We can point to the SDG indicator space and SDG page so that people can dig further, but the hope would also be that co-chairs understand their outputs and recommendations, and in navigating onto SDG can make informed choices because the goals and indicators and all that is spelled out very clearly there.
I have a comment on that, which is definitely not. I mean, the idea that the indicators are well defined for every country of the world and everybody knows how to put them together, and exactly what the nuances of the data in different contexts, none of that's really clear from the generic descriptions. You have to dig into each agency's implementation and understand where the data came from and what the issues are in putting them together. And the way in which indicators are used is itself complicated, because each country is trying to compute indicators using their own official sources where possible, whereas agencies are trying to create indicators that are consistent across countries and time, and those actually don't synchronize at all the time. So there's 200 odd variations on implementation of these indicators, of each of the indicators. So multiply 200 times 200 indicators, you've got a lot of details to understand.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think maybe I understand the goals and the targets, but I struggled really with the indicators and the values in particular that we were meant to put in. So I'd really struggle with that. But I mean, I'm not a co-chair of an RDA group, but still, I think that's pushing it. I think it would be good to have some training material, like maybe a video of, you know, a walkthrough of how this works, and maybe like with a proper example where you're actually taking an existing group and showing how you would fill in with the correct, well, correct is the wrong word, but with useful entries to show how you're meant to do this. And then show what this would look like afterwards in the actual visualization of the content, if you like, the actual graphical model. I think that would be helpful. If I was doing it, that would help me quite a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, well, I mean, world over, this indicator, and as Robert rightly pointed out, there seems to be have been an assumption when the indicators were defined in whatever the UN language used. There seemed to be an assumption that there is some kind of an uniformity, or people would understand, which we know is not at all that simple. When we get down to actually mapping the work to some numbers, comes a problem. I mean, it's not only for our RDA groups, it is for the UN SDG indicators per se. Every body who I talk to in the national statistical offices, or I'm also a member of the UN Big Data Task Force, which has a representation from different statistical offices across the people doing this across the world. And these are the discussions we often go into, that how in heaven's name would I put a number to this, what I am doing? I could not quantify it, or if I could quantify, I do it in this method. There have been, I mean, there's so much discussion around this. So I do understand what you're pointing out, Robert, and what you're pointing out, Stephanie. But your point is well taken. I think we will work out and give some kind of a help or a resource for people to just understand what's expected there. And again, to reiterate what I already said, maybe some group like our RDA data schools, for example, has a particular number, that how many number of people they have been able to train in the past 2 years or 5 years or whatever that I ask for. That's a number that they could say. But this is not true of the other groups. They struggle when we ask for a percentage or some kind of an absolute value. So yes, your point is well taken. Maybe we work out some kind of a help or some resource there to help people to understand what's expected. Thank you.
I had a related question to that topic. I wondered what was your time frame for this project, and whether you had like follow-up meetings just to monitor the progress of this work for those who are participating or contributing.
So as of now, as I said, this is simply testing out what we have done so far, and trying to solicit inputs and comments so that we sort of refine this. And once we are ready, and I think we make an announcement through RDA that and solicit input from the different groups. And this might, from our side, it certainly would take a couple of months from this plenary to the next, but we are hoping that by next plenary we'll be in a much better place to sort of start it as a production system. Anthony, if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I guess I included in the notes our emails. So if you'd be interested in maybe joining some meetings and keeping in contact and getting involved in this work, we hold some regular meetings amongst ourselves as co-chairs just to keep things moving. But we, of course, would welcome any and all support or engagement if you'd like to get involved. So if that's also of interest, please do reach out to us.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this interaction, for being here and for going through the system with us. But we solicit your comments offline. Like Anthony said, he'll give all the contact details. You can write to the group chairs or one of us or whatever, and always your comments are welcome. So Anthony, it's over to you to sort of wrap up with the next steps.
Anthony, you're muted if you're speaking.
There we go. Yeah, really, I would say if you're interested in getting involved, don't hesitate to follow the links to the group and join us there, as well as I've included our emails here if you'd be interested in reaching out to us to get involved in meetings more. And thank you all for sharing your contact details in the shared notes here. And then also, as you continue to explore the interface, if there are any other questions or thoughts or concerns, please don't hesitate to shoot them our way. That even the feedback that you provide so far is incredibly helpful in thinking through some of those caveats of how to best populate this. As always, thank you all so much for being engaged and attending here and for walking through this with us. This has been a long time coming, and I think it's been a lot of diligent work by all of us. And thank you so much to Devika and her team for producing such an excellent semantic mapping and everything that is there. And aside from that, I want to allow time for further question or discussion, but I know we have all of 4 minutes left. I, of course, am happy to hang as long as you all like, but please join our group and reach out to us if you have thoughts or want to get further engaged, and we can, of course, continue the discussion offline. I would say maybe if there's nothing else, we could stop recording and let everybody either get their morning cup of coffee or head to bed, or move into other afternoon meetings depending on your time zone.